Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products. Recorded August 26, 2021. Good afternoon, Franklin. Good afternoon, Rod. Good afternoon, Chi. How's everyone doing?
Doing great. We're recording one day after our insult show, so that's good.
For our listeners, like insult show, what happened? Is this what was that show? Was it Rocco the insult dog? The dog would just insult just like a puppet dog. Oh, that show was so funny. No, we had two guests on yesterday to talk about Azure security posture and methodologies. Talked about scenarios. We were all over the place, but even within all of that, we had fun. And we also we learned some things, and then we also concluded the show where one of our guests is going to come back, and the show will be dedicated to talking about Azure Defender for IoT and how it is expanding beyond just operational IoT to more mundanes in the industry. Plus, I made up a product at Microsoft. She's like, I never heard of what you're talking about yet. I was like, I thought it was a real product. It sounded good. So
Defender for industry.
Yes.
That's literally every Defender product we have.
Wait, I'm curious. What was that? What was that? It sounds like a new one.
It's nothing. I had no idea where I made it up from.
Edward makes up products. Edward makes up certifications. Yeah. I mean, it's
there were marketing people last night jotting down notes. Oh, Defender for industry. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where that came from. I could have swore I saw it on a slide deck or something. I don't know.
Good. I think it sounds good.
Yeah. But you guys do anything cool so far? I mean, the week's almost over. We got one day left, right?
I mean, yeah, since our last recording, absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we're on that TV show Love Island or something, because it's literally it's 2 days in a row. And
I know, right? And today's episode.
Yeah, I answered all everybody's questions yesterday.
Frank cheats on Sysmon.
I'm excited to get in depth about what we're talking about tonight. So
let's go ahead and get started. We're not going to eat up all the time. So we have a very, very distinguished guest to come on. I am so happy that she decided to bring her reputation and knowledge to the podcast. I've had the pleasure of working alongside. We're colleagues, but we do things together. But she also represents a technology or feature set inside of Azure Sentinel that I will be very honest about, that I know, but you don't know. It's like, and this may be the most left field observation. If you ask someone, how does something work, and you can go through it, but if you had to write it down, you couldn't. So notebooks are sort of like that in Azure Sentinel. So we will let her, so nobody has to go back and unlearn the bad things I'll say, talk about what she does with Azure Sentinel in regards to notebooks and some other topics that go along with that. With that being said, I'd like to hand the floor over to Chi so she can introduce herself, where she works, what she does, and then into our topic around notebooks. I promise to be quiet the rest of the podcast and drink from the red cup to our listeners. Nothing never changes. Back-to-back days, baby.
No, it should be. No, you should ask me full of questions, because I don't want to just talk by myself. Edward.
Oh, no, we're going to ask you questions.
So can you introduce yourself? So we want to. Yeah, who are you?
Who am I? Yes. So I am Nguyen. You can call me that. Like most people can't say my last name, but here you go. You hear it from me. So I'm part of the Azure Sentinel engineering team. Currently, I am driving a feature called Azure Notebook. Basically, it's Jupyter Notebooks, right? That it works, within the Sentinel portal that you will see. The notebook as a feature that is built in and natively support in there in the product. So my main job is I'm a program manager. I drive the feature, the integration, get the adoption and usage going, work with developers. I work closely with a developer in the hunting team. So I'm part of a team called threat hunting within Azure Sentinel. And then I also work closely with a couple of members from the Mystic team or the Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center team. So we build these notebooks that, hopefully we're going to talk a lot more detail about these. So that's a little bit about me. Currently, I'm based out of Seattle, and today it feels a little bit gloomy. It's not that typical in the summer that it's gloomy. Like winter, yes, it is pretty much like the thing in Sentinel. I mean, in Seattle. I mean, Sentinel, Seattle. It starts with the same letter. Yeah, but anyway, so that's a little bit about me. I've been working with Rod, so we actually collaborated in a few things together already. And Edward, I know that you're part of the GBB team. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But I don't think I worked with you yet, right, Frank?
Correct. I actually don't work for Microsoft.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So he works with Microsoft.
Yeah. Okay.
I contract to Microsoft for a special learning projects. Let's just say.
Super NDA, super secret things that even we can't talk about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right, so I've got a few questions for you to get things started here. What's the difference between a workbook and a notebook?
A workbook and a notebook? Oh, that's a good question. So, to be honest, like we have a few kind of books, right? Nomenclature in Sentinel. You probably heard the workbook. You've heard of playbook. There's another one that has book in there, and then we have the notebook, right? So, here, actually, I have little screen. I think it's probably easier if I share that and then I talk to.
This is the test. We see if the Microsoft person can share their screen in Zoom.
I'd like to ask a question because I think that Frank asked a question before you could share the screen that sort of needs this question to go first. What's a notebook in Azure Sentinel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then we can talk about what are the difference between a notebook, a workbook, and a playbook. So first of all, for our listeners, can you tell us what a notebook is?
Of course, yeah. So notebook is basically is built on an open source application that is called Jupyter Notebook, and so Jupyter is essentially an interactive kind of development and data manipulation environment. And it's hosted in a browser, right? And then how it looks like, essentially, it takes your code that you type into a notebook cell, it executes it, and then returns the output to you within the same notebook. So you can think of it's like a kind of a Word document or a OneNote kind of, right? That's how it looks like. But then this document would contain live code. It contains the narrative text, kind of give the instruction of what the code does, or any kind of context about, what you want to do. Like could be an investigation or could be a threat hunting session, and you want to provide, the context of what you want to achieve through this notebook. So, just think about like, is a notebook that contains code essentially. Yeah.
Can it contain any code, or is it a very specific set of program languages or scripting language that needs to go in it?
Good question. Yeah, so a little bit of fun fact, like a history of Jupyter Notebook. So it's the letter like Jupyter, right? So Ju actually stands for Julia. PY is actually for Python, and is actually for R, the R part. So it's like Julia, Python, and R. So that was originally the three languages that what that would meant to build and work with this Jupyter environment. But then now it's kind of expanded to other kind of languages. You can, if you look into our pre-built notebooks, you will see that they're an example with PowerShell. So you can actually work with PowerShell in a notebook too. If you're more familiar with PowerShell, rather than Python or other programming languages, you can work with JavaScript as well. You can work with C#. So yeah, so there are more options than just like the 3 original languages. Does that answer your question, Ed?
So I was able to, if you see me looking down, I'm writing. I like to sort of visualize as people do stuff. And so now it makes sense to me to add that to what I thought about notebooks, that it's an environment to be able to do a lot of things, but I don't want to oversimplify it by making it seem like it's OneNote or a scratch pad. It seems to be very interactive. You could, I don't know if you could do Markdown in it, but it seems as a place where you can do multiple types of things inside of it.
So
Go ahead. What were you saying? Were you saying something, Rod?
No, go ahead and answer his question. I'll ask my question.
Yeah. So I forgot to mention another thing which is obvious. It's Markdown. So Markdown is used to write like cells that is not code based, right? It's more kind of the text based area in the notebook. So similar to like GitHub, if you're familiar with GitHub, and I'm sure all of you already have some interaction with GitHub, so all of the text in GitHub kind of structure and written in Markdown. So same thing in the notebook. That is what kind of the language that you're going to use. One more thing, there was just a lot of options in notebook. Is actually you can work with KQL in a notebook too. So not just Python. Python remains the primary program language that you're going to need to be able to create your own notebook. But KQL is another option. You can run pretty much all the same KQL queries that you would run in a Sentinel instance, right? In a log analytics workspace. You can run all of similar queries, KQL queries in notebook. Yeah.
So hold on, Frank. I'm gonna ask this real quick. I got a list of questions. I got one I want to make sure I ask.
Okay.
Within Notebook, is there an integration point for a favorite IDE that I may use, right? Such as VS Code or something, so that I'm not actually, how do I manipulate that notebook? Can I use VS Code to be able to do the things inside of it?
Yep, another good question. Yeah, you can use VS Code. So in fact, I recommend Visual Studio Code for like when you develop or build the notebook and test it. Right, so you will to use like the debugger and like the terminal. All of these already built in, and VS Code is a great development environment. The one thing to note is the UI, right? The platform that it's hosted, that our Jupyter Notebook in Sentinel is hosted currently, is Azure Machine Learning. So it's another Azure resource, basically, that we integrate with, right? From Sentinel, when you save the notebook, it will be actually saved in a storage inside an Azure machine learning workspace. And then when you launch it, and then, it's going to be open up in a browser, right? So it's the UI from there you're going to see is the AML environment. But then from AML, actually, let me open up my.
Yeah, why don't you open up? So one of the things that people that are listening, so when I run my code, does it all just run in the browser, or is there any like compute behind it doing the actual work? Because it seems like there should be a fair amount of compute involved here that I don't think a browser could actually handle.
Yeah, very good question, in fact. So let me see if I can. Okay, can you see my browser here? Okay, perfect. So essentially, let me just go back to Sentinel, right? So here is my kind of.
Actually, we see your PowerPoint, not your browser. My fault.
Oh, interesting. Oh, do I need to reshare the screen? So if you look at this, so this is the PowerPoint, right? And then close the PowerPoint, and what do you see now? Can you see the Sentinel?
Yeah, maybe we should be doing this in Teams. No, so I only see your PowerPoint right now. Did you share the desktop or did you
Yeah,
share the window?
Probably I need to reshare. Yeah, give me a
Yeah,
second
sure.
here. Stop sharing. Yeah, because it's Zoom and I'm not like a Zoom person. So I have some learning curve myself here. Okay. Azure Sentinel, there it is. Okay, what do you guys see now?
Yeah, we're good hit now. All right, here we go. We have it.
Yeah. So so you can see that here is essentially my the Azure Sentinel portal typically would look like, right? So you see that there, a few books thing features, right? Or we call it a blade. So here we have a blade. It's called notebook. So then we have currently 23 pre-built kind of samples notebook, right? That you can just clone and it will become your own version. So if I would run one of these, like launch it from here, then it's going to open up a new view, which is, now you can see that it's within Azure machine learning environment. So from here, let me just open up one of them, and you can see that, things that we need to run this notebook. So you can see that here I have a compute that is currently running. So compute is essentially a server for the notebook, right? So server will load and basically it will load the content of the notebook, right? But you cannot run it yet. So server is all it does is, load and then save the notebook to some kind of storage account in order to execute the notebook cell. So you can see it's divided into different cell. Here is all written in Markdown. So if I double click in here, you can see this is all written in Markdown, right? And then when it goes to the code section, so this is how a code cell would look like. To be able to execute this, I need a kernel. So kernel is essentially an engine that execute, parse the code, read the code, understand the code, compile it and return the result, right? So and the kernel is very specific to what languages that you are using and even the version as well. So in this case, I'm using the Python 3.8 that's running on AML. And then another thing to note that I forgot to mention for the VM, the compute here is actually an Azure VM. It's Ubuntu. And then you can configure different kind of tier of VM, depends on how powerful or how strong that you need, in terms of the sizes for the notebook, right? So you have an option to get maybe like for development purpose, for example, you don't need a ton of compute, then maybe you would go with like the lowest tier, like 14 gigabytes RAM and 28 gigabyte storage, and then it's 15 cents per hour. But if you need like ML kind of needs, right, machine learning, you need to process tons of data, then you may want to go with like a more powerful version. Also, this is a CPU kind of machine, right? And then you can also have the graphical processing you need too. And this is even more powerful that you can see. I myself, I haven't have to use GPU yet. I've been mostly kind of doing lighter kind of work. So I use the cheapest options to save on cost. And then you can provision like the start time, the shutdown time of the VM, because I know managing a VM, it could be a pain. You don't want to like manually remember that you have to stop and start a compute, right? So you can actually create a schedule, what time of what day that you plan to run on the notebook, and then even what time to start the notebook, what time do you want it to stop, right? So all of these can be automated.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, Chi, is that I looked at the cost for the one that was 17 cents per hour.
Yeah, this one.
And so that really only equates to 6,080 cents a week based on a 40-hour week. So that's still very affordable, right? Or is my math totally wrong?
How much would that come out to, like in terms of dollars?
It's 17 cents an hour. So I did 0.17 times 40 equals 6.8. So that's either $6.80 a week, 40-hour work week.
Yeah, that is
Assuming that, yeah, that's about
reasonable.
right.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you can see there's actually estimate. Look, you can see the maximum monthly cost is 126, and 48 cent per month. So yeah, so that is so that is, I think it's really reasonable, given if a customer, for example, they have terabytes and terabytes of data, or even hundreds of gigabytes of data, and then if you want to kind of extend beyond what you can do normally with KQL, then I think this is pretty good ROIs, right? $100 a month, and you can do like pretty sophisticated stuff. Of course, I'm
and $100 a month to our listeners is assuming that you're running it 24/7. But if you do the start time, is the way she said, $6.80 a week, right, on an 8-hour workday.
It's gonna be much less, because I don't think you're gonna run that all the time. So yeah. So okay, so I guess I mentioned that we need to compute Azure VM. In this case, you need a kernel. And then obviously, like I mentioned, that there's a storage account that when you execute the notebook, it returns some result, and then you want to save it, right? Save the result, the set of result. So essentially, behind the scene, there's a storage account, file shares, right? That you can share between different members in your team, for example. So here you see that I have this workspace, this AML workspace is actually shared between 5 people in my team. So it's so that is another cost component, obviously we have to consider. But Azure storage account is very, very cheap too. It's very inexpensive option for data storage. So that is something to keep in mind. And this storage is actually independent of this VM. So VM is only needed when you want to run and execute a notebook, right? But then you can completely delete this VM. Everything that you have in terms of the notebook artifact is still there. It's still persistent in this storage account. So you won't need to worry about like whether you have to keep this VM forever. No, you don't have to. Yeah.
So we sort of covered some questions that we sort of have generated and had ready for this, and you've answered some of those around cost, the different cost levels really based on compute.
Yeah.
But if I had to summarize, the components of a notebook, what is it really comprised of? I know that it looks like a server or a virtual machine of some sort. There's some email involved. I heard you mention storage account. So what does it take to set this up? What is it comprised of?
Yeah, so actually here I can go back to one of the screen that I just used this for a training last week actually. So here, let me go back to the slide that I want to talk about. Yeah, here it is. So first of all, you need to have a Azure machine learning workspace. That's the first thing that you need to provision. For this one, you actually can create directly from the Azure Sentinel portal. So if I go back to here, to the notebooks, right, you can actually create a new AML workspace directly from Sentinel, right? So if you click on here, then it's going to open up this view. You will need to provide a name, obviously, a storage account. If you have one, you can just choose like existing one, or you can create a new one from here. You need a key vault. If you want to store like secrets or some credentials in here, then that is great. Application insights, container registries, this one is optional. So yes, you can see that there are a few components that you need here in terms of AML environment. Once you create that, right, once you have the AML workspace, going back here, like I mentioned, you will need a compute instance. And this one is essentially a notebook server, right? So if you think about a notebook is an application, for application, you will need to have a server, right? So in this case, actually an Azure virtual machine. if you run a notebook in other environment, it's possible to use like your local machine. You can use your own machine that could be a local host or local like server. But in Azure Sentinel environment, it needs to be an Azure VM.
So I also like to add that the SC200 course out there and learn the last learning path, they have a walkthrough on how to set up all of this and get you started. So there's the complete walkthrough to get people up and running with this.
Yep, that's great to mention. Yeah, we do have, and our documentation list all of these steps as well. So it's very well documented.
And people should look at more current information, because I believe that this engine changed like a year ago from what they were doing before. So don't look at content that's over a year old. Look at the stuff probably from January or February on of this year, or else you could be looking at the old way of doing this.
Yeah.
They used to have a product called Azure Notebooks, right? And then that's what they sent people out to, and that's no longer the case. So look at the more current information.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. Yeah, because we had some change in terms of the UI for notebooks. I believe around last year, second half of last year. So so it's the more recent content it is, then I would just recommend check. Don't look at things that it's like more than a year ago or a year and a half ago. Yeah, and just, if you're not sure about something, just look at our documentation. It should have the latest information. Yeah.
Blend languages inside your notebook, like portions of it PowerShell, portions of it JScript, portions of it KQL, but they all do different things within the notebook.
It can do the same thing. It's just different means to do something, right? So it's just different ways. You can achieve the same thing. Here, I actually have a notebook that I can show you. You can achieve the same thing writing with different languages. However, there are some limitation when in terms of PowerShell or like KQL, right? You know that PowerShell, it's quite limited in terms of visualization. There are not a lot of like libraries compared to all of these, Python ecosystem of libraries. Python alone, the reason Python is such a popular language in notebook is because it currently has more than or nearly 1 million Python repositories out there. So there is no comparable tools, other languages that have this kind of ecosystem compared to Python.
Right. So Edward, you might need to use a library that's written in C. So then you're going to swap out to C, but most likely Python's going to cover you anyways for what you need. So which leads me to this, why don't I just do hunting with KQL? I mean, why do I need to go out and do all this fancy notebook stuff?
Yeah, very good question. Yeah, this is actually one of the question that I got all the time. I literally, from the field that I work with, from the customer, is like the very first question before I ask, like, why the heck do I need notebooks? Right? What can I do with it? So I can think of 4 main things, right? So if anything from this podcast that I this is really the goal that I want people to take, to get out of. So number one, it's one of the most obvious things for notebooks, right? Like how it builds and how it looks like. It's for documentation, for documenting the artifacts, your findings, your analysis, right? So one of the painful things, so in security investigation, right, especially when you have a complex security investigation or hunting, one of the most painful things here is how to keep track of what you have done, right? So you may have like tens of different queries, KQL queries and result sets, and then a lot of them actually turn out to be dead end, right? It's maybe it doesn't produce the very meaningful results. So which one do you want to keep? And how easy it is to go back to backtrack and rerun the queries with different kind of values or date ranges, right? Time ranges. And how do you accumulate the useful results in one single kind of report? And what if you want to rerun the same kind of pattern, hunting pattern or investigation pattern for on the future investigation? So with notebooks, without the notebook, so let's just say like without the notebook, right, what would be the alternatives, right? You would have to do a lot of manual work to keep track of all of these queries. You have to keep track, and you probably have to keep pretty good memories too of what you've done and what kind of result that you got. But within a notebook, you can basically it give you this linear regression progression basically throughout the investigation and hunting. So it will save the queries and the data as you go, and then you can use with different kind of variables to the progression of the queries that you run, like time ranges, like the host name, account name, IP addresses, all of these entities that you're going to interact with in a hunting or investigation. It's going to make it much more easy to backtrack and rerun and reuse this entire workflow that you create for future investigation. So that is really the number one.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Another thing that, as I mentioned, is it's give you this programmatic kind of capabilities that really there is no other tool that you can think of. Like if you think maybe KQL, okay, you can do some sort of query. You can even do like some basic like time series, for example, ML analysis. But there will be times when it's it will require more complex and flexible kind of procedural control. So what I mean procedural is a procedural kind of program language is basically it will allows you to execute the logic in a series of steps, right? So if this, then that. If the result give me is A, then I want to maybe look at B, for example. But if the result give me C, then I want to look at D, for example. So it's very kind of procedural, if L kind of logic that it will give you in a procedural kind of language, which is Python essentially. But
so let me ask a quick question.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This sounds extremely powerful, right? Because can any old Joe Smo log in? What permissions do you need to be able to do this? Because it looks like you can call KQL queries. It looks like you can call functions. You can write Python. What's the Azure permissions needed to run this? Is it GA, security administrator, contributor, or if you have the permission to set it up, that it's permission enough to do everything you want to do?
Yep. Good question. So another thing, is permission is basically another point that I want to kind of make it clear here, because I know that I've seen quite a few questions or even issues that reported related to permissions, right? So here you can see that there are two components of permissions, right? So because notebooks integrated with Sentinel, so you need at least a reader or contributor permission, right? From Sentinel perspective. And then you have the Azure machine learning workspace side of thing, right? And then inside the AML, it has the built-in roles like the reader, the contributor. But then a lot of time I actually see that people need more kind of a custom type of role. So for example, if you like a data scientist or if you a threat hunter, you want to only deal with the notebook itself, but you don't want to deal with the management of the VM part of thing. Then let's say you want to be able to execute the notebooks, but you don't want to create VM or delete a VM. Then in this case, there's some custom roles that is available there that you can provision and give your user this specific set of permissions. Yeah.
All right. So let me
go ahead, Frank. I was about to say, yeah, you locked the roles down.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I'm new to this, and I just want to get started. Do I still need? Am I dumping KQL altogether? Am I learning a new query language? What's the simplest way for me to work with the data?
Yeah, so that's really good question, and it's actually not easy to to explain in just 2 minutes. Let me try. So essentially, with
Can we
our
take a look at KQL Magic? That's where I'm pointing you to.
yes. So first of all, so we have built-in notebooks, right? So for the built-in the template part, you can you can easily just launch it, run it on AML, and essentially it will give you all the direction that you need already. You don't need to customize anything. Just follow instruction and boom, then there you go. So if you want to be able to create your own or customize your own notebook, that's the different story, right? So in this case, you will need to have some sort of program languages knowledge. In this case, Python is still remained number one choice language in notebook. So some Python knowledge is going to be necessary if you want to create your own. But if you don't want to go to this Python route, then you can use the PowerShell and KQL as well. So I actually have a example. Let me see if I can pull that out right here. I have an example of using basically KQL Magic. Yes. So you basically KQL Magic is built in, is a package, right, that allows you to communicate with data, the query the data from Azure Monitor. And Log-Analytic is basically a platform within Azure Monitor where our Sentinel instance running on. So you can, let me see which one it is now. So there's a query that I run in here. Oh, there it is. So yeah, so here it is, here how it looks like, right? So to be able to use this KQL Magic, of course, you need to install it, you need to import it, and then run it. I will talk about the install and run it or import it in a minute. But in a nutshell, this is a KQL query, right? It looks familiar probably to all of you guys if you use Sentinel. So and then this should give exact the result if compared to if I use this Python library. And this is actually Mystic Pi, which is a Python library that built by Mystic team for cyber tools.
So let's, I want to talk about that specifically. So let's give them the building blocks here and start off with KQL Magic. So they can simply take their KQL statements to get started, put it into KQL Magic here, and then how do they process the results coming back from here? Right now we're just showing it. Is there any way for us to process it from KQL to further KQL Magic to further work with it? Or is this just that you're just going to run the query, display the results, and be on your way?
Yeah, so you can, depends on what kind of thing that you want to do with the query, right? So here, I have a query just to show that, now I can talk to use this KQL Magic package and query the data. That's all it does in this case. But in some cases, you would need to have a kind of the whole investigation going, right? So that's why we have these guided investigation notebooks. You can, essentially just launch one of these notebooks, and then you're going to see, that there will be some KQL queries in here too. But to be honest, I don't think, KQL is great, but there is no point of just you bringing KQL, like what you already can do in the KQL, in the logs.
So you recommend that we just do the Mystic Pi stuff, work with those functions to get started, learn it, and move forward with that versus worrying about KQL Magic at that point, because that's going to provide you a lot of functionality in the libraries that they're providing you.
That is correct. Yeah. So that's another point that I'm going to mention, that it's Mystic Pi is a library It's a Python library that is built for specifically for cybersecurity tools, right? To retrieve your data, to analyze your data, to visualize your data. And why we build this one instead of using, other libraries out there? Like we have a lot of great library, and we're still using other open source library as well, like Pandas, NumPy, Matplotlib, like all of these libraries. But Mystic Pi is essentially reduce significant amount of code that you would need to write and do the same, like simple thing. Like if you want to query the data from Sentinel and you want to convert that into a data frame, basically a kind of Excel programmatic view of an Excel, basically. That's what we call data frame. So yeah, it's reduced a lot of code and repetitive code and complex code that you would have to write. Instead, we should provide these built-in functions. And you just need to get familiar, what kind of function that you need to use, and that's it. Yeah. And in fact, we're going to have a training session on Mystic Pi coming up. So
And I'm invited or no?
of course,
Invited. I want to come.
you're
No,
welcome.
I think that there's an incredible amount of value in this library, and anybody doing threat
Mhm.
hunting through notebooks needs to learn this library and keep up with this library. It's just going to save them a lot of time. Obviously they need to know the other libraries out there and take advantage of them, but for working with your Sentinel data, this is a must through notebooks.
Who actually owns and is the curator and the custodian of the Mystic Library?
It's actually Ian, Helen, and Pete Bryan. So currently, so they are the developers in the Mystic team. Actually, originally it created by them as well. So they are the author. We updated these all the time. You will see the new version coming up as well. So it's basically, it's not just static like this. We keep improving that and adding more fun things into the libraries, more built-in functions. So yeah, so it's a well-maintained library, basically.
On that same question, the notebooks that are manifesting in Azure Sentinel, I take it they're being pushed down the GitHub. Who's the owner of those? Is that you?
So we have a team. So you mean like these notebooks, right? The pre-built, yeah, and also the GitHub repository. Let me see. Oh, did I stop sharing?
You stop sharing. That's okay.
Yeah. So we do have a team. So I am one of them. I'm the PM person in the team. We have developers in the team as well, right? We have developers who create some of these notebooks that is not Mystic Pi. So Mystic Pi is one of the main, kind of notebooks, but there's other notebooks that completely don't rely on Mystic Pi as well, just regular basic Python open source library. So maintained by us, by a few members of our team, and also the same one that you see on our repo. So here is the notebooks, the Azure notebooks repository, and we have more notebooks here compared to what you see in the portal. We also have some sample one. We have Mystic Pi specifically 1, 2. So there are quite a few more compared to what you see in the portal.
Yeah, so I mean, my biggest takeaway for people is that, Jupyter Notebooks is Jupyter Notebooks. That's no big deal. The huge value add here is this library and moving you forward with your threat hunting. And so I'm glad to see that there's going to be training on it. I'm looking forward to hopefully being accepted to go to it. If you can throw in a good word for me. And obviously there's a lot of samples out there. So when people go take a look at it, they might feel a little bit overwhelmed by what they're seeing out there. And of course you have the entire documentation site for it to work with it. I do have a question of, so basically this gives me the library is anything from, let's just say Python standpoint, that I can go out and access my external data. I can go to the Microsoft Graph to go get certain information. So basically this gives me the ability to it opens up the entire Azure world to me to do other things and completely avoid watch lists with inside Sentinel, right?
Watch list is still gonna be useful. So yes, I don't recommend like completely stop it.
It's an ongoing joke that I have here about watch lists. So, but no, it does open you up to not only additional libraries, additional Azure resources, going into the Graph API to pull information, and so on. How does it? Is this more of a forensics investigation or true threat hunting, or should this be used as part of your alert pipeline with notifications going out?
You can, yeah, you can do more simple thing, but I think it's gonna be a little bit of overkill to use notebooks for. So for example,
Okay.
if you want to, let's say if you want to create you want to sync with what is a system? Oh my gosh, my mind just got blank. The ticketing system, what was that called?
ServiceNow.
ServiceNow. Yeah. So yeah. So for example, you can easily create a ticket in ServiceNow using a playbook, right? You can maybe like triage and alerts, like a simple one through playbook. So that is when kind of you come back to your first question, like what's the difference between all of these book services? So some simple, like more kind of single repeatable tasks, I would recommend using playbook versus notebook. Actually, let me go back to this slide. I think we probably need to touch on this one a little bit.
Yeah, by the way, we're not seeing your slides, to let you know.
Now, can you see the slide or no?
You have to stop sharing because of the way Zoom does, and then figure out which screen has it.
So I think somebody put out, Rod, did they come out with that C2 analysis with notebooks? I think somebody put out an article about that. So that's actually a very good example of using the libraries to do that sort of analysis versus straight up KQL.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're back to the slide.
Well, let me ask a quick question on the slide, and I meant to ask this 2 questions back.
Go ahead, Ed.
In learning notebooks,
Mm-hmm.
is it are there learning prerequisites? Like, should I at least know how to spell Python, or do I learn Python at the same time I'm learning notebooks? Because as I see your slide here, the pros say no coding knowledge required. And we've been making a big deal of this in Microsoft, like with Power Automate and Knowledge Apps, and especially Teams.
Yeah.
Low code. Is that the term, low code or no code? Is that truly a pro? No coding knowledge required? Meaning,
You mean like for playbook and workbook? In a way, yes. Well, you can go crazy with playbook. I'm not saying like, in order to use playbook generically, like you don't really need to know how to program Python or JavaScript or, C#. It's more kind of like a UI kind of application that you can just literally drag and drop, right? The blocks of operation that you want to do. But you could go pretty crazy with playbook. And here I'm talking about playbook, right? Like in playbook, you can actually
which is just logic.
Yeah. But what I really meant,
or SOAR, right? Yeah, or the automation part in
So Edward, you don't have to become a Python expert to work with notebooks, okay? You're gonna see enough samples out there that it's no big deal for you. The real trick to getting the most out of it is 2 things. One is understanding your data, and then second thing is taking advantage of all of the libraries that are out there. So knowing the libraries and how to use them. Okay, so that's why the learning what Microsoft provides you is key to do that. So don't say, oh, I'm not a Python developer. Don't worry about that at all. You just need to learn the libraries that are out there, and that's what's key.
I would want to add a little bit more here. In typical SOCs, right? So there are times that they actually have to create your own notebooks. And analysts typically don't have this like development skill to build sophisticated notebooks for hunting, for example. But they all, most company they do have developers team. they can work with developers or data scientists, right? And then they essentially just translate the security use case for the developers, and then the developer would take care of the building part, right? So that is another way to look at that as well. So analysts just do, the job that they're supposed to do, which is responding to the incident, to things that happen in the environment. But for the building part, it could be like a SOC engineer, could be data scientists, could be, developers that can take care of the building, the testing part for them.
The data scientist part is the very important part, and learning that and taking the Microsoft classes around that, because then you're just going to apply that to everything and go from there. So that's a very important point.
Yeah, and another thing that now you bring after data scientists, one of the biggest use cases for the notebook here is ML. So machine learning is a big thing, right? So machine learning historically, it's Jupyter Notebook is actually very popular in this data science world, but then it's kind of slowly get its way into this cybersecurity world, right? So you will see it increasingly become very, very popular in security. So machine learning is one of the biggest use cases. How people use notebooks for in security. And frankly, if you think about it, if you want to do ML, like what are the tools that we have today, other than notebooks? You can do some very simple kind of seasonality analysis or statistical analysis with KQL, right? Don't get me wrong, like KQL can do some like time series analysis, for example, or clustering, like some of the ML techniques that you can do, but it's going to be very limited. It's quite simple,
and it's primarily used for visualizations too.
Yeah. Yeah. But then when there are times when you will need like specialized visualizations, or like when you want to use kind of other machine learning libraries, right? Or even like data processing for big data, because big data is absolutely needed for machine learning. So what kind of tool do we have to do that, right? KQL not going to cut it. Yeah.
So I got a question for you. Can you hook this up to go to ADX? Is that the right term, Rod, and pull the data?
Azure Data Explorer.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. You can. So in Azure machine learning environment, you can actually create data. What they have is data store, and then you can create a data set, right? So you can bring in data literally from every direction that you have. Could be in Sentinel or could be outside of Sentinel, right? So in my AML environment, actually, I have data that hooked to a Azure Data Lake storage. And similarly, you can do the same if you have data in ADX or Azure Data Explorer environment. Or if you have data outside, like even in Splunk or in AWS, like, or, third-party environments, that is also very easy to do with notebooks.
So, Chi, are you familiar with those persons over at SOC Prime? I think they're in DC, Maryland. Do they utilize a lot of Jupyter notebooks in their product? And you may not be familiar with them. I got exposed to them a couple of years ago or a year ago. And this is where I sort of saw the power of what they were trying to do with this. Do they contribute, or do you know of them, first of all? SOC Prime is who they are.
Yeah, I've used SOC Prime before, but I don't really talk to folks there like directly. So I am actually not familiar with,
It was something that popped up and I thought about it, I had it on the notes, but I'd like to ask one more question. Yeah. So this stuff sounds very good, and I'm not a novice in it, but I'm nowhere near your knowledge level. But could you do this for our listeners? Show us something cool in security. Like, hey, if you're using notebooks, guess what you can do in this? All right.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Yeah, so let me, I actually just noticed that I have another meeting coming up, but I can stay here for a few more minutes,
okay.
Next 5 minutes, and then that I will have to actually go because we have a late start. But
That's Frank's fault.
let me ping my other team members so they don't have to wait for me and they know that I don't forget about them. Just give me just
All right,
1 second.
I just submitted my name on this form here for
What'd you
hopefully
get the
going to that
form? Did you put it
training.
in chat or something? Where's the
Yeah, I
form?
did. I put it in chat.
Oh, okay.
So it's aka.ms/notebook training. You could sign up for, well, Ed, you could sign up for internal training. Frank could sign up for the public facing training, which is sometime the end of September.
You put it in somebody's chat and then come up in my chat.
You can do it through the certification site, Edward.
No, Franklin.
Yeah.
No, I cannot.
It's in the Twitch chat. You don't see that?
Oh, you're in the Twitch chat.
Yeah.
My Twitch bit the dust.
Oh, sorry. Is there
So
a...
I'll get it from you.
All righty, I'm back. Sorry for the wait there, but let me maybe open up my environment and see what example I think that we can use today. So we have a lot of good example. The trick is to have the data actually, to have the data.
That's always the trick.
Exactly. And to do that, I have to actually create the demo data, create the similar, attack. And that's a lot of work by itself to just set up the demo. But here it is. I have a super simple one that I actually used for training last week. I'm going to just use this one as an example today. So this is how a notebook looks like, right? You can typically, I want to start with like a table of content. Just like you have in a Word document, right? You want to be able to see, quickly see what kind of things that I'm going to see, the section of content that this notebook's going to provide me. So in this case, I'm going to have a warm-up section, and then I'm going to get the intro, and then showcase some of the main features that you can do with notebooks. Let's just start with that. So here I typically start with a warm-up, right? Essentially, it has nothing to do with security yet, but it's mainly just for testing a compute and kernel to make sure that all the setup are ready. So if I run a very simple math function here, 2 + 2, and I expect to see 4, obviously. So let's see if it's going to print out 4. And then another simple loop, Python is basically iterate from 1 to 6 and print okay. Okay, so that looks good. So my computer is running fine, kernel is set up okay, so we're good to go. Now, getting into the security worlds, right? So first of all, in order to configure or get the notebook environment to work with security with Azure Sentinel, first of all, in this case, I'm going to use Mystic Pine for this notebook in particular. So this one, first of all, I need to basically install Mystic Pine, import some library. So I'm going to just run it. Actually, it's already ran. I shouldn't have to run again. But you're going to see some output here. It's going to check the latest version of Mystic Pine, and then my Python version that I'm going to use in this case. If everything looks okay, it's going to give me some indication that it is okay. So here you can see Python 3.8, okay. And then notebook pre-checks complete, right? So we good. So now getting into the next step, which is basically, once you want to have the Mystic Pine libraries install and import it, I just need to, in this case, actually, I need to import this after I install it, right? So I already run this one. I'm for the interest of time, I'm not gonna rerun this one. And then for this one, essentially, I'm going to use the external TI provider, which is VirusTotal in this case. So I ran this. This is still part of the configuration step, right? So this one is essentially will show me, for some reason, it doesn't show the output. Let me see. 1 second. show the output. Now I just probably need to rerun everything because essentially that's what happened. Like when you start running one style, you gotta run the next one so that you can see the output. So in this case, let's just give it a few seconds. It's going to, so in this case, I'm going to use external service to work with Sentinel data, right, for enrichment. I'm going to use virus total, and I'm going to use geolight, maximize geolight to get geolocation of IP addresses. So I'm going to need the configuration, like get the API key for virus total, store it in a config file, so that I can use it later, right?
That makes sense. Yeah, being able to store those secrets and store those variables to be able to call those named.
Correct. Yeah. So it's going to be stored in a YAML file. Essentially all of that step, or like essentially all of the things that I've been doing, which is like configuration step. So now, I need to rerun everything, I guess.
All right, fine.
Anyway.
This makes sense. I think
a lot of the stuff is copy and paste what she's doing. So
Exactly.
don't be overwhelmed by how much code is here. A lot of it is in the samples out there. So you just have to know the libraries, know what you want to do with the data, and know how you want to do the analysis, and you're good to go.
Well, and see the idea here, and just to kind of help you out just a little bit while she's doing that, the idea here, and what I absolutely love about notebooks, and I always try to simplify things to make people understand a little bit better. We talked about OneNote a little bit earlier, right? So it's kind of like OneNote, except with the coding and the programming and everything that's built into here, you're collecting and storing all the steps that you took to investigate or hunt something, and everything, all the collateral that you used, the queries, the scripts, all the visualizations, everything is going to be stored in this one single thing, right? And all you have to do is hand this notebook over to, let's say it's a security intern, somebody's interning for the summer, and you want them to help you out with your security efforts. You hand them this notebook. They don't have to know. They don't have to have a clue about security. They don't have to have a clue about anything. They just have to follow these steps very specifically. They come to a result, and they let your security team know, hey, this is an issue. This is something that needs further investigation or whatever, right?
Correct. Yeah. That's perfectly, how I would look at that. So here you can see that, one version of the notebook that I already ran, and then I exported that to PDF, right? So this is actually comes from the tour Introduction to Cybersecurity Notebook Features, or a tour. So I actually ran this one before. Just for the interest of time, I'm not going to rerun the other notebook. And then, so essentially you will see that, the code, and then you see the output, the result of it, right? And then you can query the Sentinel data from here. You can, let me see if there's any interesting data in here. For example, in this case, I want to list all of the sign activity and with the geolocation information of the sign in within a specific time range, right? So then I will just query it out, and then it show me the results. And then if I want to customize the query, I can, Mystic Pi had this time like selector kind of function that allows you to select like the time range pretty easily on a slider. It will look like a slider that you can slide back and forth, or you can just write it in here in the function itself. Specify like, if you want to look at last 2 days or 28 day or 14 day, run a query, then it's going to give you the results. Let's see what else could be interesting from here. Custom query and visualizing data. Yeah, that could be also interesting. So in this case, using pandas and so here I'm looking at the different IP addresses and see how prevalent each of them are, right? So if you can see, without this graph, it's gonna be pretty difficult and see like what is the most commonly queries IP, right? So you can see from here directly, this is happened like 20 times versus something like it's pretty rare, this IP. So visualization is great, and especially in Python, there are so many libraries, just number of libraries. You can go pretty crazy about visualization with Python. It's just different view
cool.
of the thing. Yeah, it's just different view of the thing. I think there was another one that it looked quite crazy. I'll see if I can find one that, see if my screen is not frozen. There was one that I just ran like right before the podcast. Where is that one? There was one that it looks quite impressive. Where is it? Oh, did I lose it? I think I might lost that. Okay, never mind. But anyway, if you look at our preview notebook, you will see some notebook will have some crazy visualization there. And of course, it has to be useful too, right? Not just for the heck of looking nice. It gotta be useful in your investigation, especially if you look at things like time series. You can easily spot kind of the trend. Actually, here, let me show you. There's actually one. Sorry, I'm going all over the places here. I'm going to this machine learning example, see if we have the visualization in here. Oh, this one doesn't show. Too bad. Okay. But anyways, there's some notebooks that actually show the ML technique of time series, and you can easily see. So let's say you want to be able to spot the trends, right? See the baseline in your network activities. Then using a Python library, you can actually see it very easy. You can see that, hey, this is the typical time that people log in, and then certainly you have some outliers. It looks, certainly more suspicious. It's just the volume looks like higher than normal, for example. Yeah, then it looks pretty cool, but I don't have it here to show. Okay, so let's see what else could be interesting from here. So this is another kind of visualization. So this, using Bokeh.js, you actually can zoom in specific like a spot in here. So this one is in PDF. I can't zoom it, obviously. But if it's in a live notebook, you can actually zoom in and see kind of in more specific events that you want to drill deeper into. And then here's another way to look at things, right? So let's say you have multiple apps that you have events that that trigger from multiple apps, then you want to be able to see the events that happen that came from each of the apps, right? How many of them and what kind of time that it's happened. And then if you hover into these points, like the data point, you can actually see all of the detail related to each of these events. I can't do that here on PDF, obviously. Yeah,
so a lot of this. I'm sorry to cut you off, Anji. A lot of this is gonna. Well, how much of this? Well, how in depth will the training be? Will it take you from 0 to hero, or will it? If I use the atypical 100 to 400 in Microsoft, that your training is going to be at what level? 2 to 300, or 3 to 4, or just it starts low and then at the end of your training, I don't know how long it lasts.
Yeah.
Where's it ultimately in?
So good question. So we actually going to have a series, right? So the first session we did for customer, we're going to have one in September, around end of September. That's the first session. Then we're going to have the next one, which go into Mystic Pi fundamentals. So that could be maybe 200 level, like 200, I think, for Mystic Pi. Given that now, by that time you should have a kind of a good understanding of what our notebook does and how to interact with a notebook, then at that point you kind of want to create your own notebook or customize a version of your own notebooks, right? So that is when you actually need the knowledge of Mystic Pi. So we're going to provide the next session after the one in September for Mystic Pi. Yeah, and actually we're going to have a trainer from Mystic team directly. It's going to provide the lesson. So I'm very excited about that because I want to learn more in depth myself in Mystic Pi. So okay, let me go back to this PDF real quick, right? So after you have the data, you visualize it, right? You want to enrich it with maybe like some TI information. You want to be able to see whether it matched any of these IOC that it's well known, is known out there, or you should simply want to see a report of, of this entity. It could be like an IP address, or it could be a machine, could be a user entity. So in this case, I have a entity which is an IP address, and I want to look up in VirusTotal very quickly, and then even other kind of TI services, right, like OTX, like export, just to see, or Tor, see, what kind of information related to this IP address that I can work with. So it thankfully look like this one is just information. It's not like high severity. So yeah, but it's still useful to know, right? And then so let's see what else. Yeah, so once you enrich your data, you do want to do some analysis with the data, right? So in this case, I should have a very simple encoded PowerShell command, and I want to be able to quickly decode it and unpack it, right, to get more context. So in this case, using a built-in function in Mystic Pi, right? It has this unpack function really quickly. You can pretty much decode this, unpack it, see what does that mean when after you decode it. And then what else do we have here? IOC extract. Yeah, so essentially these are kind of some very basic example, right, of the things that you can do. But when you put all of this together into a session, when you do investigation or when you do hunting, it's going to look a little bit different. It's not going to be like all of these sample that I show. It's going to look more like this. So if I go maybe into one of the guided investigation, let's just pick this one. So this one, unfortunately, it's somehow all of the output got clear. I think I clear up before this, and that was my mistake. Essentially, this one will just guide you through how to triage alerts, right, that you have in Sentinel, and then you enrich it with some threat intelligence, and then essentially it allows you to triage a large number of alerts all at once, right, and then kind of zoom in and kind of steer your focus into the ones that is matter most for your investigation. So this notebook is essentially will walk you through step by step how to do that. And then we have some guided hunting as well. So one example is this guided base64 encoded Linux command. So essentially it looks into different encoded commands. If you have any Linux hosts in that you ingest as the syslog messages, right, in Sentinel, then you want to go to see, whether they are malicious, like if these commands or, any of them are, malicious and needs your attention. Then this notebook will provide a collection of tools that you can analyze, rank these commands using a number of different tools, and then it will give you some pretty good recommendation, so then you can easily look into the one that it looks more suspicious than others.
Yeah, I see that you use VirusTotal for a lot of your TI source.
Yeah, the reason is because it's pretty good too, in my opinion, and it's also free. So
Yeah, free.
it's free too. Why not, right? And it just take a couple of code cell to integrate that in here. So it's a simple but very useful tool.
Did I also see Alien Vault?
Any volts too. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Alien Vault's not free. Well, they have a free, but
Well, Virus Total is free up to a certain number of requests per day.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's yeah.
yeah.
It has
Mhm.
some limitation, of course. There's nothing completely free, obviously. But
Nothing's
you can
free.
use, like, yeah.
And
All right,
it's
I think we're
I'm
running
gonna,
up against time, Edward, here. So
yeah, we are. I
she
just
has
looked over. I was trying to follow her in my little environment at the same time. I don't have all of those in there for some reason, but this is very good. I am looking forward to the training. I'm going to beat up on my tenant, um, and I'm going to play around with this. So I learned a lot. I got some
Yeah.
notes. I'm
Go
going to
take a
sign up
look
for
at
the
it.
training.
Some of the built-in one. Yeah, the pre-built one. And so you have an idea of how it looks like, what you can do with them. And yeah, so this is not it, obviously. These are, going forward, there we have pretty aggressive plan for notebooks for at least like the next coming months. There will be more integration that you're going to see, especially around machine learning and big data.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that is very exciting. That's one of the things that, you know, larger enterprise kind of customers, they ask specific for that kind of scenarios. So yeah, I can't reveal all the details for that yet because we're still building it. So
Okay.
but you should see more announcement in the next few months. Yeah.
Well, this has been super informative. I've learned, I'm sure our listeners are going to do what they always do. They take our stuff, and they go out and they go get learned up, right? And then they come back with questions. So thank you so much. You are always welcome to come back on. I know that trying to cover this huge topic, that's why you have training. You can't do it in a day, right? You gotta be able to do it in chunks. You're always welcome to come back. You don't have to wait for an invite. If you want to come back and say, hey, I got a part two I want to tell you guys about, right? And just let myself or Rod know or Frank, and we'll put you in a slot. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for being late for your meeting, even though you were late for your meeting because of Franklin. We appreciate that understanding.
all right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me too.
Huh?
Yeah, and I'm sure we probably will meet again in another podcast just because we have so much with notebooks for this upcoming month, and I'm very excited for that to announce
All
them.
right.
Mhm.
Well, we want to be the first person to put it out there. We can say that you're a friend of the show, so they got to hear first, right? Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you guys. Yeah,
Mhm.
have a good one. Bye bye.